Hi, I'm Amanda Morgan, and this is Not Just Cute, the podcast, where we discuss all kinds of topics to help bridge the gap that exists between what we know and what we do in early childhood education. We're starting conversations with academics, authors, decision makers, educators, and parents so that together we can improve the quality of early childhood education, while at the same time protecting and respecting the childhood experience. Before we jump in, I want to share some feedback from educators using the Why We Play letters to communicate the importance of play in early childhood education and in whole child development. Brenda, a full-time teacher who is also working on an advanced degree, shared that with everything else on her plate, these pre-written letters helped her accomplish her objective without adding to her workload. She said, "Your resources are spot on. The newsletters are helping my parents understand why teaching the whole child is so important. With teaching full-time, researching, and writing my paper, it was one less thing I had to think about, so thank you." One educator even reached out after simply downloading the free sample letter, saying, "Thank you so much. It's a wonderful letter. In fact, it's perfect." Remember, people don't value what they don't understand. Help parents and administrators understand the power of play by starting important conversations with Why We Play. Learn more and grab the free sample letter at notjustcute.com/why we play. 𝐅𝐫𝐞𝐞 is a force to be reckoned with. With her unapologetic straight talk, she has been advocating for children and for whole child education for decades, filling shelves of books with her words and inspiring educators around the world. Her latest book, What If We Taught the Way Children Learn, fits this pattern, calling into question the many instances where our common practices seem to be at odds with what should be common sense about how young children learn and grow. In fact, Dr. Eric Jensen says 𝐅𝐫𝐞𝐞's powerful, thought-provoking book provides rare and uncommon sense. Our kids would be much better off if we practiced the way this book suggests we do, and so would the educators around them. You can find show notes for this episode at notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 37. If you've ever questioned the status quo in early childhood education or wondered how you could better educate the whole child, particularly during this time of unique regulations, you're going to want to listen to what 𝐅𝐫𝐞𝐞 has to share today. So let's jump in for some straight talking, uncommon sense from 𝐅𝐫𝐶𝐞. Hi, Ray. Thanks for coming on to talk to me about your new book. And now you're just a prolific writer. So how many books is this for you now?
Hi, Amanda. Thanks for having me. Well, it's 21. I kind of have a writing disease.
Well, it's a fantastic disease.
Yeah, it's if you're going to have one, that's a good one to have.
And it's a very helpful disease for other people. So we appreciate you and your all these books and all this work that you've put out there to help children and families and teachers. So your newest book is called What If We Taught the Way Children Learn? And I love that title. I love the quote that it comes from. If children don't learn the way that we teach, maybe we should teach the way they learn. And I just think it's one of those really profound and obvious, simple quotes all at the same time. So
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your feelings behind that quote and how it inspired this project.
Well, that's one of those dark questions. Like you said, it's obvious. What if we taught the way children learn? I mean, hello.
Right.
Why are we not teaching the way children learn? What sense does it make not to teach the way they learn? I mean, I think the inspiration for the book was all the stories that I hear about frustrated teachers and frustrated children and all the policies that come down that are developmentally inappropriate. And, I get mad. And so I have to speak out about it. We didn't have the research in the past about how children learn. So we stuck them in rows and, expected them to sit primly with hands folded. But we do have the research now. We have fabulous research, and I don't understand why we have it if we're going to ignore it.
Right. And that's so much of what this work comes down to. I feel like really that's the essence of developmentally appropriate practice, right? Is that we take what we know and make sure, what we know about how children learn and grow, and make sure that that's being implemented in their homes and in their schools and in all their environments. That's the essence of what it is. Are we doing what we do, does that match up with what we know? And that's just like what you put in this title or from this quote. If we have struggles with how children are learning, which there are many and many conversations about that, if we're concerned about children not learning what we're hoping that they would learn, instead of, like you said, reverting to these old notions and these old stories about how children learn, we just look at the research. What do we know? And why don't we just teach them the way that they learn?
Yeah, why don't we, I hear stories about, oh, well, they have to learn about the continents, or they have to learn about words like hypothesis at age 3. And when you ask them why, they say, well, because we have to get them ready to be 4. No, I'm sorry. You have to appreciate and value them at 3, and bring out the best of them as 3-year-olds, not be worrying about what they're going to be doing at 4.
Yeah, just building that foundation right at the present, right where you are.
Yeah, another duh idea.
Right. That's the great thing about a lot of early childhood work, right? Is it's the simple things that are really so profound. We've just missed them for what they are.
Yes.
Well, I love when I opened up your new book, it looks like it belongs on the shelf right next to your book, What If Everybody Understood Child Development, which was another fantastic book. Can you share a little bit about how these books are similar and how they're different? They look like they are just part of a series, which I hope continues.
Oh, thank you. Well, they're both, that's such an interesting question. They both consist of short essays, so they're really easy to read. You can just pick it up and read one, and
in any order. I love that.
In any order, exactly, in any order. They're both what I consider Ray's rants, because I'm ranting about something or other. The new one has a section on advocacy, which is different, because I want to be the only one, not the only one ranting. I want everybody to start speaking up. But I don't know, looking at them, I would say, What If Everybody Understood Child Development is sort of the foundational one. We're looking at why does sitting still equal learning, and why we don't have to bubble wrap them, and the fact that all children aren't the same, and that sort of thing. I think maybe this second one, which definitely was intended to be a follow-up to What If Everybody Understood Child Development, is a little bit more specific and a little bit more, just maybe a little bit more prescriptive. So we talk about how to do transitions in a developmentally appropriate way, and we talk about common sense solutions to behavior challenges. So there's a lot of similarities, but this is just a whole new set of rants.
And I love that it builds on, like you said, you have the foundation in the first one, and then this extends on that basis. And like I said, I hope that continues. There are plenty more rants, right? We're all ready for it. We're here for it.
It would be nice if one day there wasn't a reason to rant.
That's true.
Wouldn't it?
That is true. Well, one of the topics that you address is how challenging behaviors are often tied to some of the expectations and the practices that we have adopted into the early childhood classroom, whether intentionally or unintentionally. So can you give some examples of those counterproductive practices and how those tend to play out in the classroom?
Absolutely. Well, one of them is that we're not allowing children to play anymore, and it's just ludicrous to me. We wouldn't keep kittens and puppies and baby goats from playing, and it should be just as ridiculous to keep children from playing. It is a huge part of nature's plan. Mm-hmm. It's what they need to do. It's what they need in order to learn and to grow and to express their feelings. Nancy Carlson Page once said to me, if children don't let their feelings out through play, then where do those feelings go? And it makes so much sense. So right. if they're holding in all those feelings, that is maybe the biggest, along with our unrealistic expectations for them. As I said, if we're expecting them to do things that they're not developmentally ready to do yet. The mother who wrote to me just desperate because her son's childcare center kept sending home notes complaining about him because he couldn't sit still and he couldn't properly grasp a pencil. And her son was 3. Her son was 3. So she asked me, should a 3-year-old be able to do these things? And I said, no, absolutely not. So what happens to the child who fails to meet unrealistic expectations? They want to please the important adults in their lives, but they're unable to because nature has meant for them not to be able to. They're just not developmentally equipped to do it. So frustration sets in, disappointment. They begin to feel like failures. And I'm telling you, if I wasn't allowed to play and I was expected to do things, if someone stuck a scalpel in my hands and threw me into the operating room and said, perform surgery, I would be a little upset.
I'd have a meltdown for sure.
Yeah. Or, threw me into a cockpit and said, here, fly this plane. I'm not ready to do that. I'm not prepared to do that. I would be frustrated. I would be frightened and I would act out. So right. I think a lot of these things contribute to challenging behavior.
Definitely. Well, one of the things that I'll often say in the trainings that I do is that often what we see as inappropriate behavior is actually a reflection of inappropriate expectations, which is what you've explained perfectly.
I love that.
And one of the things that works in that you've mentioned, one of those inappropriate expectations that we have, a lot of them center around movement, and that's something you've done a lot of work with for decades. You have been there for movement before some of us were born. We could say that. Getting close.
Yes,
some of the people
I've been
listening.
around for 112 years.
So why is it that children need to move? And again, we were talking earlier about so much of what we study and talk about has been around for 100 years or 50 years or 60 years. But we keep having to say it over and over and over again. So what are one of those things that you know about why children need to move? And what we know about how it influences learning and development.
We could spend hours on that one topic alone. But again, children were meant to learn by moving and by playing. Movement is their preferred mode of learning. So there's, another one of those questions. If we know how they prefer to learn, why would we teach them in any other way but the way that they prefer, the way that nature intended? So, I'm hearing a lot of negative results, because children are not being allowed to move, because they're not, worksheets use only one sense, the eyes. And we know, the research tells us that the more senses we use in the learning process, the more we retain. So when we move and play, we're seeing and hearing and feeling. It's all of these senses coming together. But there are, some really strange things besides misbehavior or challenging behavior, I should say, coming about it, because children aren't being allowed to move. They have no fine motor skills anymore. And I hear that from teachers all around the country, that children can swipe, but they don't have the strength to tear a piece of paper, which is terrifying. And a lot of people listening won't know the connection between movement and tearing a piece of paper. But we know that motor development occurs from the top of the body to the bottom, from the inside, the trunk, to the outside, the extremities, and from the large muscles to the small muscles. So we can't expect them to hold a pencil properly or to tear a piece of paper unless they have that large motor skill play, the big body play. Mm-hmm. A lot of people say the best way for them to learn to write is to let them climb trees and swing from the monkey bars, both of which we're not letting them do anymore because we have a tendency to bubble wrap them. Mm-hmm. They can't cross the midline of the body, that invisible vertical line that goes from the top of the head to the feet and divides us into left and right sides. And, that might not seem like such a big deal. So they can't cross the midline of the body. But if we understand the connection between mind and body, then we will believe it when we hear that impacts their reading and writing. They have to have that cross-lateral experience. They have to be able to cross the midline of the body. There's a lot of science behind it.
Yeah, and it's all so fascinating. Like you said, there's this tendency to isolate skills, but they're so interwoven. And when we try to just skip over them to get to the performance we want to see, but we haven't done the work to build that foundational aspect. So like with moving, and like you mentioned it, I love that you pointed that out, those large motor movements that we want to just skip over and keep everybody quiet and sitting down and moving their pencils.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work that way because you can't skip over that part of the process.
Well, exactly. You mentioned foundational, and I used the example of building a house. I mean, you wouldn't slap up the first or second floor before you had the foundation down. So why would we expect anything different from human development?
Right. Now, when it comes to movement, I imagine, particularly right now, that we have a lot of people who are listening and thinking about the challenges that they have, the parameters that are set around movement where they are, that maybe they want to promote movement, but they feel they have a lot of restrictions placed on them in their own expectations as teachers. And particularly right now with the different parameters set on classrooms within this context of the pandemic, that really creates a challenging situation for people who want to promote movement, but they also have to work within these really specific parameters. Do you have any suggestions or advice for how people can continue to incorporate movement even in these challenging situations?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that we're in the most challenging situation we've ever seen. I mean, none of us have ever lived through anything like this before. But even before that, Amanda, there were so many teachers telling me that they couldn't do the things I recommend because their administrators would slap them on the wrist or simply not allow them. And these ridiculous policies that come down from people who haven't a clue about children or early childhood development or educational policies or making all the decisions about education. Mm-hmm. So, we've always had that restriction and now we've got these other ones. But whenever possible, just, brain breaks. Just if the children are required to sit for long periods of time because of your school's policies or whatever they might be, then make sure after every 10 minutes or so they get up to move. I mean, Eric Jensen, who's written a bazillion books on brain-based learning, tells us that the brain can only absorb so much stuff, for only a handful of minutes at a time before it becomes just useless to keep trying. Mm-hmm. So we get them up and we do a little bending and stretching, a little jog around the outside of the room, whatever it might be. It's really simple and you can sneak them in. We take advantage of transitions because transitions involve moving from one place to another or from one part of the day to another. So we take advantage of that and we give them experiences that teach them something because we all know transitions will frustrate the heck out of an early childhood professional. But then again, that's because we're asking them to do things that are unrealistic. Stay still and be quiet. Well, right. They're not ready to do that. So what if we needed them to transition quietly, what if we were leading them in a game of follow the leader and just tiptoeing in an exaggerated form? Or we asked them to move like a whisperer or as though they were weightless astronauts. And so we're engaging body and mind. I mean, whenever possible, and I know this isn't always possible with policies being what they are, active learning. I mean, they need to get high and low and wide and narrow to really understand those quantitative mathematics concepts. And they need to act out stories and words and all of that. And so I mean, that's the general answer I would give. Now, specifically in terms of these challenging times, my heart goes out to the teachers and to the children. Personal space is going to be a bigger issue. I've always been a proponent of teaching the children, to understand personal space, their own and others, and to respect their own and others. And so there are a lot of personal space kinds of activities that we can do to help with that. In fact, I have created an ebook on that. I've got a whole library. Right now there are 14 ebooks in there, and it's a free resource library for early childhood professionals. So, if they go to 𝐅𝐫𝐞𝐞.com, they'll see a couple of places just on the homepage where they can access that library. So the personal space issue, there will be modifications required. For example, an activity like This Is My Friend that I'm very fond of, that's adapted from Terry Orlick's book of cooperative games. Instead of the children are in a circle, and instead of standing close to one another and holding hands, you can, and maybe you need to take it outside, but you can space the children instead. They're not holding hands. And instead of raising the arm of the child next to them, they turn and point to the child next to them. This is my friend. So we just have to make some modifications, but not forget the child's need to move and play and physically experience concepts.
Oh, absolutely. And I just did an episode before this and talked about just a lot of what you're just saying, that we maybe can't do the ideal thing that we wanted to do, but that it's a continuum. In fact, I used the connection to the least restrictive environment from the IDEA Act, that getting, just what you said, getting as close as we can to that ideal, remembering what children need and balancing it with the requirements of our time, and finding what is the sweet spot between those two where we can do that. And you gave some great examples of how to just brainstorm, think outside of the box, take the principle, take the needs, take your restrictions, and find where they converge, where do they meet, where you can do.
Yes, that's very well put. Thank you.
And I'll make sure that I link that resource library. It sounds like that has a wealth of information that could help get people started on what types of activities, get those activities, and instead of saying, oh, I can't do that, look at it and say, how can I do that? How can I adapt this and modify this so that we can do something like this?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of the things, even if you're teaching virtually, can be done with the children. The brain breaks are very important if you're teaching virtually. And so, sure, yeah.
Well, ultimately, your book is a call to get what we know about how children learn and grow, like we said before, to get that in line with what we do in the classroom, which is something that we are both very passionate about. And one of your chapter titles, I just love it. It says that we're making a mess of human development, which I think is really striking and apt. And that's one of the things that I love about your writing style. You're fearless. So you will come right out and say, we are making a mess of human development. So what can you say, or what would you say are some of the main concepts that people need to understand in order to teach in a way that does not make a mess of human development? What are some of those main concepts that you probably have been preaching all your career and continue to preach, but if you had to bring those down to a few main concepts, what can we be doing to make sure we're not making a mess of human development?
Well, let me tell you the inspiration behind that particular chapter. I read, and I'm sure that you've heard about this, that children were falling out of their seats in school. And I almost fell out of my seat in shock. I mean, it was just, what are you talking about? And it's not a one-off. It's not an uncommon thing anymore. One first grade teacher counted, and in a week, her children, it happened 44 times that her children fell out of their seats. So, amazing. Well, yeah, it is amazing, and it's not okay. The reason they're falling out of their seats is because they are not moving enough. And more specifically, Mother Nature meant for children to move in order to develop their proprioceptive and vestibular senses. And as you know, proprioceptive sense is the one that allows you to know where your body and body parts are in the space around you, so you can walk up the stairs without looking at your feet, so that you can, reach for the bottle of water without having to watch your hand go and bring it to your mouth. And then the vestibular sense is all tied up with balance. It's all about balance. So if you don't have those senses, you're going to fall over in your seat. You're going to bump into everybody and everything else. And those senses are pretty much developed by the time children are 6. So obviously, They were meant to, to take part in these spinning and running and jumping and twirling and hanging upside down activities that children used to do before the age of 6. So when we're preventing them from doing this sort of thing, we are making a mess of human development. Who do we think we are? We don't know better than nature. Seriously, we just don't know better than nature. So, in terms of what I would advise, it's just so basic, and it kind of sounds stupid. I would like us to allow children to be children. I would like us to expect children to be children and to respect nature's plan for them. That's what I have to say.
I love that. And it's like you said, it's one of those things that feels so simple, but sometimes it's those simple things that they're missed over and over and over again. And I'm so glad that we have people like you to keep reminding us of those simple, profound truths that make such a huge difference. I think sometimes that's where it's so easy to miss them, because they're simple, but they're so profound that it, like you said, makes a mess of human development if we are so careless as to skip over those simple things.
Maybe that is the problem, Amanda, that they seem so simple, that it's easy to overlook them. Or if we want the best for our children and we don't understand that the simple things will get them there, then that's going to be a problem. Parents are getting so much misinformation these days, and one of the big ones is that earlier is better, whether we're talking about athletics or academics. We feel as though if we don't push them to do these things as soon as possible in their lives, then they will never reach the level of success we want for them. And it's simply not true. It's a myth. So, and then, as I said, we've got these policymakers who don't have a clue, and so much of what business people are telling them, telling school systems and parents what they want from children, and they just don't understand that the best way to get there is to follow the process, to follow the plan that nature intended.
Yeah. I keep trying to decide if it's a missing the forest for the trees situation, or if it's actually we're missing the trees in the forest. I'm not sure.
I think we're missing it. We're missing it all.
Right, one way or another. Well, Ray, it is always such a pleasure to talk with you, and thank you for all that you do, that you continue to do for children and for childhood through your work and in helping us to become advocates with you. I just can't wait for you to come back on here and discuss your next book.
Oh, gosh, just give me a break. I'm working on online courses now. They're a little less challenging than an entire book.
Yeah, well, we can't wait to find out more about those.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks again for listening to Not Just Cute, the podcast. You can find show notes at notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 37. There you'll find links to several of Ray's resources, including her newest book and her free resource library, along with other interesting tidbits we addressed in this episode. Show notes will also share a link to the Why We Play letters, so you can check those out and download the free sample letter. I'm Amanda Morgan. You can read more on my blog and sign up for the Not Just Cute newsletter at notjustcute.com. And follow me on Facebook. That's facebook.com/notjustcute. I'm also freshly and awkwardly on Instagram, so follow me there at Amanda_notjustcute. Thanks for listening today, and as always, thank you for standing up for children and for childhood.